Alright, so this is take 2 of the Meraki SAML authentication since I forgot to record it earlier. So, here we go. Good morning, this is Brian. I'm going to be going over how to integrate the Meraki dashboard with your Meraki SSIDs and using Google authentication through the use of SAML. So first I'm going to start off by going over what SAML actually is, and then we're going to go through why it is beneficial for you to use. And then we're going to actually step through how to enable your single sign-on for the Meraki SSIDs for the students to log into the Wi-Fi. And then I'm going to go over how to integrate SAML with your Meraki dashboard. Again, both of those are going to be using Google authentication. So SAML stands for Security Assertion Markup Language, and according to oasisopen.org, is defined as a common XML framework for exchanging security assertions between entities. So what it boils down to is you have a user, an identity provider, and a service provider. So your user will request access to a specific service through the service provider. Then the service provider will request verification of the user from the identity provider. That identity provider will then request authentication from the user if it hasn't been given through some other means. And then once the identity provider has proven that the user is who they say they are, then they will pass on that information to the service provider along with what authorization they have. So a nice little visual to see how it actually works. Again, user requests access from a service. The service provider requests authentication and authorization from the identity provider. And that identity provider, if it hasn't already been given, will request authentication from the user and then pass information back to the service provider, who then allows access or denies access to the user. A real-world example of this would be when you log into a website and it has the login with Facebook button or login with Google button. That is an example of SAML. Most of the time it's implemented that way. However, in this instance, it's actually going to be implemented by using a Google app. And so instead of going to the Meraki.com login page and clicking login with Google, you're actually going to go to your Google dashboard and click a Meraki app that we're going to create, and then it will do the same basic thing behind the scenes, just implemented slightly differently. So benefits of SAML, probably most obvious one, you don't have to remember multiple usernames and passwords. So you just have your Google login and password, and from there get in everywhere else that you implement Google authentication with. You also can define roles, which can make it easier to modify the permissions for specific users or to duplicate the permissions for new users. And so we'll go through how to create roles later on. And then from a security standpoint, you're using SAML, you only have to provide your authorization or authentication credentials to the identity provider, and then the identity provider will talk to the service provider using PKI. And so all of your credentials, the service provider never even sees your credentials, your passwords, nothing goes to them. That's all through a separate and secure communication path, which uses PKI. What is PKI, you ask? Great question. So PKI stands for Public Key Infrastructure, and this by itself can be an entirely other webinar. It can go quite in depth, so I'm just going to kind of gloss over it for now. But if you're interested in such a webinar, please let us know, and we can look into doing that maybe next summer or something. So PKI consists of software and hardware elements that a trusted third party can use to establish the integrity and ownership of a public key, and that definition is pulled from Microsoft.com. Basically, it is a way for two entities to exchange encrypted information and prove who they are to each other through the use of a third party called a certificate authority. And so you have your user will have a certificate and then they will pass. They will have gotten that certificate from the certificate authority, and then they will, whenever they want to talk to another party, they will give them that certificate first, and then that other party will show that certificate to the certificate authority and prove that it's authentic. And then once they've proven that, then they can go back to the original user and start their encrypted channel once they've proven to each other that they are who they say they are. So now we're going to go into implementing your single sign-on for students to the Wi-Fi. So this can be done entirely from your Meraki dashboard. You're just going to go in, choose the specific network you're going to implement this on, and then go into your wireless settings and SSID. And you're going to hit edit settings. And then under the edit settings for that specific SSID, and again you'll have to do this individually for each SSID you want to implement this on. You're going to go down to the splash page section, and you're going to hit sign on with, and there'll be a drop box. You can hit that radio button next to sign on with, and then go into the drop box and select third-party credentials. Below that is a box that says accepted credentials, and another one says allowed domains. And this is where you will tell it basically who the identity provider is. In this case, it will be Google. And as of right now, I believe Google is the only one that they are set up to do this with. So you'll start to type Google into the accepted credentials box, and it'll pop up below it. Once you start typing, it'll pop up Google as your option. You can just click that, and it'll it'll fill in the box. And then you go into the allowed domains box, and you're going to put your school domain. Now, caveat here is that you cannot differentiate between students and teachers and staff and anybody else if they all use the same domain. Which means that, for example, you see here we have k12gaps.mcnc.org. If, say, we were a school and all of our faculty, all of our students use k12gaps.mcnc.org, and we implemented single sign-on for this SSID, then both students and teachers would be able to log in to this SSID. And so the only way you'd be able to split up a single sign-on for multiple SSIDs and separate it between students and teachers is if your students and teachers had different domains. For example, if it was k12gaps.students.mcnc.org and k12gaps.teachers.mcnc.org, then we could have single sign-on separately for each of those. But if you only have one domain, then you won't be able to get that granular with it. Below that, you'll see another option that says simultaneous logons, and so using that, it will track if a specific student or teacher has already used their logon for a device. And so if you set this to limit users to one device at a time, then students will not be able to, if they log in with their laptop, then they won't be able to log in with another laptop or with their phone or a tablet or whatever. They will only have the one device, and so that will help you cut down on the amount of associated traffic one time on your wireless LANs. Alright, and so once you save that, you should be good to go. Whenever students try to log on, then they will, they'll hit the SSID they want to log into, and it'll bring them to a splash page for Google login. And you can customize the splash page too by simply going to the wireless settings and hitting splash page. And then that'll bring up another page that'll let you change whatever pictures, whatever text you want on there, directing students or teachers or whoever to do whatever it is you need them to do. Make it look however you want, put your school logo on there, or leave it the default, however you like. And so that covers that. So that one's pretty straightforward. When I did this earlier, I did get a question about subdomains. So for our example, we had k12gaps.mcnc.org. Someone asked if you just put .mcnc.org, if that would cover all subdomains. And my answer to that was that I hadn't tested that in depth with it, but I did try a little bit, and it seems to take the exact domain you put in there. So if I had just mcnc.org, then it would only take at mcnc.org, and it wouldn't do any students.mcnc.org or anything. So it seems to take the exact domain that is put in there. So now let's move on to integrating SAML into your Meraki dashboard for your administrators to log in through Google. And keep in mind too, once you implement this, administrators will have to use the Google app that we're going to create to log in. So you will no longer be able to go to the Meraki login page and type in your credentials there. If you try that, then it will tell you that SSO is enabled and that you have to log in through your SSO service, which would be Google. So we're going to go into our admin console first and go under users. And then in the top right here, you're going to click that little guy. And that's going to be your manage user attributes. And so it's going to pop up this window. At the bottom there, you're going to add a custom category. And then you can name this category however you like. You can give it a description if you want. I simply chose to name mine single sign-on, SSO. And then you're going to give the attribute a name. Again, just to be straightforward and uncreative, I chose role for the attribute name. The type, multiple values, and private options should be text no and yes. Just leave those as they are. You can play around with the settings if you like, but it's really just easier to just leave them as is. There's really no point in changing them. Once you have that, I'm going to click Finished, and then you're going to go to the pane on the left and hit the security area, where you go and get the certificate fingerprint to provide to Meraki so that they can talk to each other through that PKI we were talking about earlier. So go into the security section, and you're going to open up expand the single sign-on tab, and then you'll download the certificate. And once you download the certificate, we have to actually get the fingerprint from the certificate. And so there are a couple options. The option I find it easiest, is to go to this website here, https://www.samltool.com/fingerprint.php. You can go here, and what you do is you open up the certificate in like Notepad, or your application of choice, and you'll copy the text therein and paste it into the X509 cert box here at this website. And then you make sure you have SHA-1 selected for the algorithm and click Calculate Fingerprint. And that'll bring up your fingerprint right there. The other option is that you can go into your web browser of choice and import the certificate that way. And you'll do that by going into the settings. There should be somewhere in the settings a place that says Manage Certificates. And that'll change depending on which web browser you use, obviously. But you go into Manage Certificates and import the certificate from wherever you have it saved. And once you've done that, you go into the details of the certificate, and there should be a place that says thumbprint. And that'll be which, at least in Chrome, it says thumbprint. It might say fingerprint in Firefox or something. But thumbprint, fingerprint, whichever it says, you're gonna find that, and again, you're gonna copy it, and it's gonna be the same thing that's provided right here. So, two ways to do it. End result is the same thing. So once you have that, you're gonna go back into the Meraki dashboard, and we're gonna go under Organization and Settings, and you're gonna scroll down to SAML Configuration. And at first, you'll probably only see this guy right here. So SAML SSO, and it'll say SAML SSO disabled. So you're going to open that up and choose enabled. And then this will pop up. Initially, the consumer URL will be blank. But you'll see these boxes here. And so you're going to paste in that fingerprint or thumbprint that you just copied. And then you're going to hit save. Once you saved it, then this consumer URL will pop up. And so you're going to copy that. And then we're going to go back into the Google admin console. You're going to go under Apps and then SAML Apps. And under SAML Apps, at the bottom right of the page, you'll see a little yellow circle with a plus on it. And you're going to hit that, and it's going to pop up this screen. And then from here, you're going to hit set up my own custom app. And the custom app, you can name it whatever you like. Feel free to add a description and a logo. I put in, I think I copied the Meraki name and then cut it down to just the M. So our logo is just the M on it. Or you can put your school logo, whatever you choose that's going to make it obvious that it's going to make sense to you that this is the Meraki app. So once you've done that, you're going to hit next. And then that consumer URL that we pulled off the Meraki dashboard, you're going to paste that right there in the ACS URL. And then for entity ID, you're going to fill that out as https://dashboard.meraki.com. And then everything else, you can just leave the defaults and hit next. So next, it'll bring you to the attribute mapping, and you want to put in that role that we created earlier in the process. And so you're gonna hit, for me, put in role, and then single sign-on, and then role is the specific attribute that we created within that. And then you'll hit finished. And from there, you can at that point the actual app has been created, and you want to make sure it gets turned on. So it should be on for everyone by default, and you can leave it that way if you like. That just means that all your users will be able to see it in their apps list. If you haven't given them a role to log in to the dashboard with, then they won't be able to log in. They can hit the app and it'll bring them to a single sign-on error. But if you don't want them to see the app at all, if you want only your administrators to see the app, then you can choose on for some organizations. And then as long as you have your admins broken out into a separate organization from everybody, then you can turn it on just for them. Google does warn that it can take up to 24 hours for that to take effect for all the users. So if you do that and something's not working right, give it a day, and hopefully it'll be working tomorrow. Now from there, this last bit, we go back into the Meraki dashboard now, and you're going to go under Organization and Administrators. And now you should see the SAML Administrators roles pop up in the Administrators page. And this will be very similar to creating your general administrators as you've done in the past. You just hit the Add SAML role, and this should look familiar to you. So again, use organization access, none, full, read-only, however it is you want for that particular role. And then you'll put whatever networks you want them to have access to. If you have cameras at your school, then you can give them access for admin access to the cameras, or view-only access to the cameras. However granular you want to get with it. If you need help with this, Meraki does have their documentation here. You can go into that and explore through there to figure out the specifics. So you're going to go through and create roles. You can create as many roles as you want. I don't actually know what the physical limit for how many roles you can create, but I'm sure it's more than you'll need. So go through, create all the roles you want, and then we'll go back into Google Console, and we're going to go through each admin user that you want to give access to, and assign the roles to them. So you just go into your users, and select the specific user, and then open up that account, expand that account tab. You go down there, manage user attributes, and hit edit, and that'll bring up a window, and it'll slide through all the attributes that you've created. And if you don't want to give them that attribute, then just leave it blank, don't assign them anything. Once it gets to that single sign-on attribute that we created, you're going to go into role and type in whatever role that you created in Meraki. And so as you saw earlier, I created the SAML admin role, and so I typed in right there SAML admin. You might have created a SAML read-only, or a SAML cameras, a camera admin or something. And so you'll just type in whatever that name of the role is in Meraki. You'll type that in exactly as is here, because it needs to pass that text as is. So you put that in there, hit update user, and then that's it. So each of your admins should see the Meraki icon in there, or however you named it, whatever icon you gave it, they should see that in their apps list. and they can just hit that, and it'll bring them straight to the dashboard. And that's all there is to it. So at this point in the webinar, I had asked for questions, but since this is just a redo for posterity's sake, that is going to be it. So thank you very much for listening, and enjoy the rest of your day.